Everything you've been told about getting disciplined is total garbage. You've been told that discipline is all about grinding through things even when you don't feel like doing them and just making these earth-shattering efforts and giving it your all each time you do an activity. How's that approach working for you? I'm assuming not too well since you're here. Let's take Joe for an example. Joe is 27 years old, has an average job. Joe notices that he's getting fat and wants to hit the gym and perhaps get a hold of his life. Joe makes the decision to flip his life around. He watches tons of motivational videos on YouTube and hits the gym hard. Does a 90-minute workout and absolutely gives it his all. Joe does this for 2 or 3 days in a row, but on day 4 everything changes. On day 4 Joe's motivation runs out and now that 90-minute workout begins to feel like a mountain. Joe literally dreads going to the gym, and lo and behold, Joe starts skipping the gym. Life eventually happens, and Joe simply does not have the time or energy to get a 90-minute workout in. This is what happens to 90% of the individuals who decide to pursue a new activity. The problem with their approach is that it relies heavily on motivation. But what no one tells you is that motivation is a limited resource and is bound to run out. And as soon as their motivation levels drop, they no longer perform that activity. What if I told you that in order to get disciplined, you do not need to rely on motivation at all? Motivation is just that initial spark, the thought about who you really could be. But discipline is that fuel which allows you to go through a long journey once that initial spark is gone. If you do not convert this initial spark into a long-lasting fire, you are going to end up like Joe. In this video, I'm going to share 3 simple tips that will make you 10 times more disciplined, regardless of how you have lived your life in the past. So let's get right into it. You see, every task that you do requires some amount of activation energy. It's the energy required to get yourself to just start the task. Activities that you're already familiar with will require a much lower activation energy, and activities that you're not familiar with will require a much higher activation energy. Let's say the activation energy required for brushing your teeth is fairly low because most of you are used to performing that behavior, or at least I hope so. It's just so automated at this point. You know what time you have to brush your teeth, you know where the toothbrush is, where the paste is, and what movement pattern is. In the case of Joe, going to the gym was an activity that he was not very familiar with. He did not know what to wear to the gym, what exercises to perform in the gym, how to behave around other individuals in the gym. Maybe he was too self-conscious. All these things make the activation energy required for Joe to go to the gym extremely high. Initially, Joe was able to climb this barrier of high activation energy by using raw motivation. However, as soon as the motivation ran out, Joe was no longer able to get the activity done. The real secret of getting extremely disciplined is to lower the activation energy required for each habit that you perform. This way, you no longer require motivation to jump the activation energy barrier. But the question is, how do you lower the activation energy required for a task? Think about the activities that you perform fairly regularly. These could be activities such as going to work or going to school or attending university. The thing that all these activities have in common is a time and venue. When you know the time and venue for an activity, then your body subconsciously begins to prepare itself for that activity. It subconsciously processes all the things that are required to perform that activity, and once your mind is prepared to perform a particular habit, then the activation energy required to perform that habit is reduced significantly. If you are someone who wants to get into the habit of reading, then I suggest that you mark a time and know a place where you are going to be reading. So it could look something like, I'm going to read tomorrow at 7 a.m. in my room at my study table. Now you have a concrete plan. You no longer have to make a decision tomorrow. Making decisions on the go adds to the activation energy required to do a task. But when you decide the time and venue for an activity, then you have already made a decision well beforehand. Through this exact way, I get multiple habits into my life. Once you have a time and place listed for all these activities on a sheet of paper or an app, then you have yourself a routine. And that is a hallmark of being a disciplined person. We all know that one person who has been trying to lose weight for ages. That person loses a couple of pounds here and there, but after a couple of days, he is back to his original weight. This is because that person still has the identity of a fat, unhealthy person. Imagine a rubber band placed between 2 of your fingers and being stretched out from one end. This represents all the effort that you have put into a new behavior. It stretches and stretches and stretches, and then BAM! It eventually returns to the other end. This end represents your identity. Your identity is your core beliefs about yourself. It is the way that you perceive yourself. That person who's trying to lose weight without fixing his identity eventually ends up failing. That person who's trying to quit smoking without recreating his identity eventually ends up relapsing. Identity is what makes certain behaviors difficult or easy to perform. That person who has been going to the gym and lifting weights for 10 plus years has developed the identity of someone who trains consistently. The amount of effort required for him to get another workout session done is significantly lower than someone who has never trained in his life and doesn't have that identity. Constantly trying to pull the rubber band from one end without first fixing your identity is futile. Fix your identity and you will begin to make progress effortlessly. Now, there are two ways to fix your identity. Think of your identity as a box in which you can cast votes. The more votes that you cast in a box, the stronger that identity gets. Each time you go to the gym, you are essentially casting a vote in favor of that identity of someone who goes to the gym. So if you're a newbie to the gym like Joe, then your goal should be not making earth-shattering efforts and doing 2-hour-long workouts. Your goal should rather be simply to cast votes in favor of that identity. So you could literally go to the gym for like 30 minutes or less. Days on which you are really busy, you could literally just read 1 page of a book rather than reading 10. By doing this, you're still casting votes in favor of that identity, and you're making your next gym session or your next reading session much easier to perform. Of course, once you have successfully built this identity by microdosing on tasks, then you could increase the difficulty of the task, and the task would still feel manageable and you would not be overwhelmed by it. But if you make that task too difficult before building an identity, then you're going to snap the rubber band and quit. You are what you think. Whatever it is that is in your conscious mind, it eventually transfers over to your subconscious mind. And finally, it can be seen in your body language. Like, think about it. When you think of food, you drool. When you think about having a fight or an argument, your body gets all amped up. What goes on in your head can be seen on your body. If you're someone who constantly berates himself and tells himself that he's not simply designed for a task or a habit, then guess what? You are right. Each time you start a new habit, you need to have positive affirmations regarding that habit. Let's take the habit of going to the gym, for example. You need to talk to yourself and let yourself know that you are someone who values health and fitness. You are someone who is known for consistency. I know this sounds kind of wishy-washy, but once your identity is created through affirmations, then performing a behavior feels far more natural. If your self-image is not recreated, then performing that behavior feels like swimming against the current. It's far more taxing. There is one last thing that makes tasks far more difficult than they actually are. It increases their activation energy, destroys your self-image, and erodes your discipline. It is what you put inside your body. If you're eating garbage processed food that is making you tired and giving you brain fog, then none of what I have mentioned is going to work for you. Every task is going to seem extremely hard to perform if you're hooked to instant gratification. If that sounds like you, then make sure that you check out this video and fix your desires for instant gratification.